This will be titled Multiplying and Dividing Positive and Negative Integers. I use this little diagram. I'll draw it up here. The pig, yes. To multiply and divide integers, just to remember. Or you could just remember a negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. And negative times a positive is a negative. Positive times positive is positive. You could just remember that. A lot of people don't remember that. This diagram is only for multiplication or division. And I split it into 3 groups. Negative, negative, and positive. Kind of looks like a pig. And the way you do it is by covering up stuff. So if you have 2 negatives, then you would cover up the plus sign. And then a negative times a negative, and then you lift up your hand, is a positive. Does that make sense? If you have a positive and a negative, and you cover up a negative, and a negative times a positive, or negative times a positive, and then you lift up your hand, is a negative. Some people used to draw this on like every little quiz or test that they had. Or you could just remember. It should be really, really simple. This will go by quickly. I'm going to do an example. Any questions so far? All right, example 1. What if I have 3, let's write it this way, 3 times negative 6. What would this be? Anyone? So we have negative 18 here. It would work the same if you had the negative 3 and the positive 6. That's still negative 18. It works the same if the 3 and the 6 are switched around, just so you remember that. What if I had negative 1 times negative 6 times 3? What would that be? Anyone? 18. Positive 18, right? Because the 2 negatives in front make a positive 6. And then you didn't do anything with this 3, so it's 6 times 3. That would be positive 18. You guys understand how that works? You're going to have stuff going in a row. This is pretty much it. 2 positives make a positive when you're multiplying. Lots of people forget. They think like, oh, 2 negatives make a positive. But you have to distinguish whether you're multiplying or whether you're adding or subtracting. And we'll get to that in a minute. Sometimes, most of the time in algebra, we're going to write the multiplication with parentheses like this. Both of the numbers can be in parentheses. Or we would write it like 6 times 3. That's also 18. That's another way to write it. On your assignment today, we're hardly ever going to write it like this, but on your assignment today, it's written like 6 times 3 some of the time. That's still 18. These are all ways to write multiplication. Does anybody know why we don't write it like this last way in algebra?
Because the variable could be confused.
Yeah, that times this multiplication symbol could be confused as an x, and we will start using variables that would be called a variable. So that it gets kind of confusing. So we don't really do that anymore. But on your assignment, there are no variables, so it just means multiplication. So I guess this is kind of like a second set of notes, but I'm going to say addition and subtraction of positive and negative integers. An integer. What can anyone... There's a question. Well, first of all, you have to know whether you're adding or subtracting or you're multiplying or dividing. That tells you which one of those posters to use. When you're adding and subtracting, you use this. The first thing you would say, or the first thing you would ask yourself is, are the numbers the same sign? So I would say, we're going to draw that flow chart right there. So same sign, question mark, and then we'll put a box around it. Are the numbers the same sign? If there's a subtraction sign in the middle, it at the same time also counts as a negative. That's what gets confusing for people. Because I would ask, is it the same sign? They would say yes, and then I'd say, well, there's a negative there, and then they would say, but that's the subtraction. It's also a negative. So be careful with that. Subtraction between two numbers is like a negative for the second number. And we'll see an example. So, is it the same sign? The two answers to that could be yes, or it could be no. And you do different things depending on which answer you give. If your answer is yes, both of the numbers have the same sign, like a negative minus something, or a negative plus a negative, or a positive plus a positive, then all you do is you add the numbers and keep the sign. So if you're adding two negatives, you're going to get a negative because they're both negative. They have the same sign. And you're going to keep that negative sign. If they have different signs, you're going to subtract the numbers. And use the bigger sign. And you'll see what I mean when I do an example. All right, let's look at an example and try and use this. This will also be example 1 with maybe a lot of sub-examples. So here's how we do this. Or here's how we use this chart with this example. The two numbers that I'm looking at, can you guys see my pointer? Yeah? The two numbers that I'm looking at are this -5 and this +3. This addition can also be considered the positive for the 3. If it was a plus a negative, then it would be a -3. I'll go over something like that in a minute. But right now I have a -5 and a +3. So, are they the same sign? No. So, what do? Subtract the numbers. So I'm going to go 5 minus 3, 2. And then the 5 is bigger, right? So it's going to be -2. That's some way you can try and remember this. Or use that. That's going to be up there for the whole year. So you can use that. That's how you use it. This would be -2. A lot of people forget and they just write 2. Just because that's the difference between the two. Questions on that? That's how you use this. Let's do example 2. Let's say we have -8 plus -6. Are these the same sign? This one's a little bit different, right? Here we have this plus, but we also have this negative. If you're adding a negative number, it's still a negative number. Okay? So this 8 is positive or negative? Negative. And the 6 is negative. So are they the same sign? Yes. So add the numbers, keep the sign. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So our answer is what? Yeah, -14. That's what I mean by keeping the sign. If they're both negative, your answer is going to be negative. Does that make sense? Note that this is also the same thing as -8 minus 6. That's an S. On this one, the subtraction sign is a negative and the subtraction. This part counts as a subtraction and a negative. That's what confuses a lot of people. Do you guys understand that? We good? No? This negative sign counts as a subtraction. You can say, when you read it out loud, you can say -8 minus 6. But when you're using this flowchart, that minus counts as a -6. It makes it count as a -6. So then you would say, are these the same sign? You would consider the subtraction a negative, so the 6 is negative, the 8 is negative. Yes, they're the same sign. This plus right here just got changed by this -6. Just know that these two are the same thing. Yeah? If you see this and you like writing it like this, you can write it like that. If you see this and you like writing it this way, you can write it that way. I used to have students that